The message arrived in the quiet hours of the morning. It came through the secure channel in the Earth diplomatic network, wrapped in the kind of encryption that only the most important transmissions used. Mara Solon, senior representative of the Terran Union, was sitting at her desk when the alert light blinked. She reached for the small silver token beside her keyboard. It was a habit she had picked up years ago, to touch something real before facing something big. The message was short. The Galactic Council formally invited the Terran Union to the Grand Assembly of Accord, the most important political gathering in the known galaxy. It was to be held in the Hall of Unity on the capital world of Alindra. Humanity would have a seat at the table for the first time in history. Mara leaned back in her chair and let the words sink in. The council did not invite new members easily. Some species had waited hundreds of years for the honor. Humanity had been exploring space for less than a century. She thought about the generations who had dreamed of this moment, the explorers who had crossed the void, the engineers who had built ships from nothing, the scientists who had unlocked the secrets of faster-than-light travel. She also thought about the challenges ahead. The council was known for its elegance and its politics. Deals were made as often through smiles as through words. Humanity was still learning the rules of that game. Mara knew that behind the friendly tone of the message there would be agendas, alliances, and power plays. She was not going to let Earth be treated as a minor voice in a room full of giants. The preparation began at once. Within a day, she was on a shuttle heading for the Terran Union's main spaceport. The skies over the Pacific Spire were clear and blue, the kind that made the glass towers shine like silver. As the shuttle descended, she saw the great human, fleet anchored in high orbit, long, sleek ships with white hulls and the Terran emblem painted in deep blue. It was a sign of how far humanity had come. At the spaceport, technicians in gray uniforms moved like clockwork. Diplomats in formal attire walked quickly across polished walkways. Mara met with her team, 4 experienced advisors from the Union's political council. There was Aaron, calm and steady, who knew the history of every species in the council. There was Lyda, sharp-eyed and quick-tongued, who had a talent for finding the truth behind polite words. Jaren, the youngest, was an expert in trade law, and Dalen, tall and quiet, was a former ship captain who understood the strategic value of human fleets. They boarded the Union's flagship diplomatic vessel, the Horizon Star. It was not the largest ship in the fleet, but it was one of the most advanced. Its meeting rooms were lined with maps of known space, and its bridge looked out through a wide glass viewport that could display data overlays in the air. The crew moved with quiet confidence. They knew this mission mattered not just to their leaders, but to every citizen of the Union. The journey to Alindra took 4 days. During that time, Mara and her team studied every detail of the Council's recent decisions. They reviewed trade agreements, border disputes, and the histories of member species. Each name carried weight. The proud Avrix with their towering forms and metallic voices, the wise but cautious Talrin with skin like carved stone, the restless Varan whose ships could outrun nearly anything in space. Humanity had worked with some of them before, but never as equals in the Grand Assembly. When the Horizon Star arrived in Alindra's orbit, the crew gathered at the viewport. The capital world was breathtaking. A ring of silver stations circled, the planet like a crown. Below, oceans sparkled under the light of 2 suns, and vast cities stretched across green continents. Towering spires reached into the clouds, and glimmering transport lines connected them in shining arcs. They were guided to the central docking platform reserved for council guests. As Mara stepped out, a wave of warm, fragrant air touched her face. The scent came from the flowering gardens that lined the arrival plaza. Around her, alien species moved in a steady stream. Tall beings with wings like glass. Creatures with eyes that glowed softly in the shade, others with scales that caught the sunlight. Some paused to look at the human delegation with interest. Anna, Elindran guide, greeted them. She was slender, with silver hair that shimmered in the sunlight and eyes that reflected the sky. Her voice was clear and formal as she welcomed them to the Hall of Unity. They walked together through wide paths of white stone, past fountains that sent fine mist into the air. When they reached the hall, Mara stopped for a moment to take it. In Astanmar, the building stood like a mountain carved from crystal. Its walls caught the light and scattered it in soft colors across the plaza. Great doors stood open, each one high enough for the tallest Avrix to pass through. Inside, the air was cool and filled with a faint hum, the sound of distant energy systems. The assembly chamber was unlike anything Mara had ever seen. It was a vast circle, with rising tiers of seats. Each seat was shaped to match the needs of the species that used it. Wide platforms for the winged Philira, deep water tanks for the aquatic Selvari, sturdy stone benches for the Talren. At the center stood a long, curved table of black glass, its surface alive with faint shifting patterns. Representatives from across the galaxy were already gathering. Their voices filled the chamber in a blend of languages and tones. Some looked toward Mara with polite nods, others with curiosity, and a few with unreadable expressions. She could sense that some saw humanity as a welcome addition, while others viewed them as competition. The chair of the council, an Avrix elder named Sorn Talvek, stood at the head of the central table. His tall frame gleamed under the chamber, lights, and his voice carried easily across the room as he called for order. He welcomed the human delegation formally, naming them as full participants in the assembly for the first time. Mara walked forward with her team and took her place at the table. She sat with a steady posture, meeting the gaze of those who watched her. Inside, she felt the weight of the moment, not as a burden, but as a challenge. This was where decisions were made that shaped the lives of billions across the stars. The first session began. The council moved quickly through ceremonial greetings. Delegates spoke of unity and progress, of the great shared destiny of the galaxy. But Mara's attention sharpened when the chair announced the first matter of real discussion, a new set of trade regulations that would be voted on before the end of the week. She listened closely, and as the terms were read aloud, she felt a quiet warning in her mind. The language was careful, but she recognized patterns. Some clauses gave subtle advantages to older species. Others placed restrictions that could limit younger members like humanity. She said nothing yet. She would. Wait, listen, and learn. The time for speaking would come. Mara sat back slightly, her eyes calm but alert, while the voices of the galaxy's oldest powers filled the chamber. Humanity had taken its seat at the table. Whether the others knew it or not, that simple fact was about to change everything. The first day of the assembly moved quickly. Speeches of welcome gave way to detailed debates. The chamber's air shifted from warm ceremony to the cooler, sharper tone of negotiation. Mara sat at her place, her hands resting lightly on the black glass table, watching and listening. Every word mattered here. The trade regulations proposal was read out by the chair, Sorn Talvek. His voice was slow and measured, as though every sentence had been carefully shaped long before the meeting began. The proposal promised fair access to trade lanes, balanced exchange of goods, and reasonable limits on technology sharing between members. The words sounded pleasant, but Mara had been in politics long enough to hear the meaning behind them. The council's senior members were protecting their position. Older species like the Avrix, Talrin, and Selvari had controlled trade for centuries. Their fleets patrolled the busiest routes, their stations anchored in the richest star systems. The proposed regulations kept those patterns in place. Younger members like humanity would be given certain access, but under rules that slowed their growth. As the terms were displayed on the table's surface, faint patterns of light traced each clause. Arun leaned slightly toward Mara and spoke, in a low voice. Notice the freight tax rates. They claim equal percentages, but the definition of standard cargo unit is set to the Avrix model. Our ships carry more per unit. That means we pay more in practice. Lyda, seated on Mara's left, added softly, and look at the trade lane restrictions. They call it safety management, but those red-marked sectors are the fastest routes between our colonies and the outer rim. We will be forced to use longer paths. Mara kept her face calm. The Avrix delegate across from her was watching. She had the sense that several eyes in the chamber were doing the same. Some were testing her reaction. Others might already be measuring how far humanity could be pushed. Sorn Talvek invited comments. A Talrin representative rose first, speaking in a slow, stone-deep voice about the importance of stability. Younger members often underestimate the dangers of rapid expansion, he said. These measures will protect all from overreach. His words were met with nods from the other senior species. A Varen delegate followed, smiling as he spoke about fairness. His tone was friendly, but Mara noticed that every example he gave of balanced exchange was one where younger members gave more than they received. It was a careful dance, no open insult, but a clear assumption that humanity and others like them were secondary players. When Sorn finally turned toward the human delegation, Mara stood. She spoke clearly, her voice carrying across the chamber without force but with precision. The Terran Union appreciates the effort to create stability, she began. However, we must understand how these terms will be applied in practice. Equal words do not always mean equal effects. A faint ripple moved through the chamber. Mara's words were polite, but her meaning was sharp enough to be felt. The Avrix delegate across from her leaned forward slightly, a sign of interest. Sorn replied, Your concern is noted, Representative Solon. The Council's legal office assures that the terms are fair to all members. Mara did not press further. She simply inclined her head and sat down, her expression unreadable. She had learned that sometimes the most powerful statement was the one not made yet. The meeting moved on to other matters, security coordination, cultural exchange agreements, and fleet response protocols. But Mara's mind kept returning to the trade regulations. She could see the shape of the strategy now. The Council's senior members were using this gathering to lock in their advantage for another generation. During the midday recess, Mara and her team gathered in one of the smaller side rooms reserved for private discussions. A wide window showed the Alindran gardens below, where beings of every shape and size walked among fountains and flowering trees. Aaron spoke first. They are presenting this as a simple renewal of old rules, but it is an expansion. If we agree, we are locked into routes and prices that favor them. Lita nodded. And they expect us to agree. Look at how the Talryn spoke. They think of us as ambitious but inexperienced. That is how they will justify these limits to others. Jaren, the youngest, frowned. If we fight this now, do we risk being isolated? Could they limit our access to other agreements? Mara looked at each of them. If we accept this, we limit our own future. The question is not whether we can live with these terms. The question is whether we should. Dalen, who had been quiet until now, spoke in his deep, steady voice. I commanded a patrol fleet for 12 years. Routes are more than trade. They are lifelines. Control the routes and you control who grows and who does not. If they keep us on the long paths, they slow our reach in every direction. Mara considered his words carefully. Then we need to be sure we understand every angle before the vote. They will not expect us to walk away from the table, which means that option may be our strongest card. When the afternoon session began, the council returned to the trade matter. This time, amendments were discussed. A Falira representative proposed a small change to technology sharing rules, but the chair dismissed it as unnecessary. The Avrix delegate made a long speech about the dangers of destabilizing existing agreements. Mara waited until the right moment before speaking again. She did not challenge them directly, but she asked questions about timelines, about how the regulations would be reviewed, about the possibility of revising routes if new colonies emerged. Each question forced the chair to clarify terms, and with each answer, the room became more aware of how tightly the regulations were designed to hold. By the end of the session, several younger member delegations were looking toward Mara with new interest. The human representative was not loud, but she was careful and exact, drawing attention to points others had overlooked. As the chamber emptied for the evening, Sorn Talvek passed by the human table. His metallic eyes held a faint glimmer, not quite a smile. I trust the Terran Union finds the process enlightening, he said. Mara met his gaze. Very much so. We are learning a great deal. When he moved on, Lyda leaned closer. He thinks you are impressed? No, Mara said, standing. He thinks I am predictable. That will be his mistake. The human delegation left the hall together, their steps steady under the Elendran evening light. The air was cool now, carrying the scent of the gardens. Above, the twin suns dipped low, and the crystal spires of the capital caught the last gold of the day. Mara knew the coming days would decide far more than trade routes. They would decide whether humanity entered this grand alliance as a partner or as a junior player bound by rules it had not written. And she had no intention of letting Earth's voice be reduced to an echo in this chamber of giants. The next morning began with the deep, resonant chime of the Hall of Unity's signal bell. It rang 3 times to call the delegates into session. The sound rolled through the crystal corridors, gentle yet commanding. Mara and her team walked in together, their black and silver Terran uniforms standing out among the many colors of the other delegations. The chamber was already half full when they arrived. Representatives spoke in low tones, exchanging updates and opinions before the chair began. Some gave Mara polite nods, others simply observed. She could feel the unspoken question in the room. Would the humans accept the trade regulations, or would they try to push for changes? Sorn Talvek opened the session with a review of the previous day's progress. He spoke of the need for swift decisions and of the great responsibility each member held. His voice was calm, but Mara noticed how often he used phrases like established, stability, and proven systems. It was a reminder to all that the older members of the council had been guiding policy for centuries. The discussion on trade resumed. An Avrics economic advisor presented a long report filled with charts and figures. The data was meant to show that the proposed regulations would benefit all. It was precise, well-prepared, and heavily biased toward existing trade networks. Arun leaned toward Mara and whispered that the numbers compared human routes to the most costly lanes, ignoring the efficient ones humanity had recently mapped. When the advisor finished, Sorn invited comments. Mara waited a moment, then stood. "The Terran Union thanks the Council for the detailed report," she said. "However, there is a concern about the assumptions in your data. Our own surveys show travel times and freight efficiency that are not reflected here. For example, the Alindra-Halvan corridor is listed as unstable, yet our fleets have traveled it without incident for 2 years. Her words were calm, but they drew a visible reaction. A few younger members nodded slightly. The Avrics advisor shifted in his seat. Sorn's metallic gaze focused on Mara for a long moment before he replied. "Your experience is noted. However, the Council's safety assessments are based on comprehensive analysis over many cycles." Lita caught Mara's eye and gave the smallest nod. They both knew what was happening. The Council was not ignoring humanity's achievements by accident. They were shaping the rules to fit the old structure. The debate grew more pointed. A Varan delegate suggested that humans should focus on developing internal stability before taking on the busiest trade lanes. His tone was smooth, but the meaning was clear. Humanity should accept a smaller role for now. Mara asked him directly, "Would the Varan have accepted such terms when you first joined the Council?" The Varan delegate hesitated, then smiled. "We joined under the wisdom of our elders. It served us well." It was a polite way of avoiding the question. Still, Mara could see that a few in the chamber had noticed the gap in his answer. The turning point came when an older Talran representative, a figure of great respect, rose to speak. His stone-like features remained steady as he addressed the room. "The younger members of this council must understand that rapid change is dangerous. When species grow too fast, they make mistakes. Some even collapse under the weight of their own ambition. It is our duty to guide them, even if they do not yet understand what is best." There was a soft murmur of agreement from the senior seats. Mara remained silent, letting him continue. Then came the moment that tightened every muscle. In her back, the Talran turned his heavy gaze toward the human delegation. "Humanity, for all its energy, is still learning how to live beyond its homeworld. Without the support of this council, you would face difficulties you cannot imagine. This agreement will protect you from yourselves." The words hung in the air. They were not shouted. They were not even cruel in tone. But the meaning was unmistakable. The Talran had just told the entire chamber that humanity could not survive without the guidance of the older powers. Mara's team sat in still silence. Lita's jaw tightened. Arun's hand rested flat on the table, his fingers unmoving. Dalin's eyes narrowed slightly. Mara stood slowly. Her voice was even. "Representative Tharek, the Terran Union values the experience of those who have traveled the stars before us. We have learned much from our friends and allies. But we have also crossed dangers without the Council's aid. We have faced threats on the edge of known space and emerged stronger. We seek cooperation, not guardianship. Her reply was measured, but inside, her mind was clear. The Talrin's words were not only arrogant, they were a signal to the room, a reminder to all that the older powers believed themselves the natural leaders, and the younger species, including humanity, should follow. The chair moved the discussion forward, but the atmosphere had shifted. The insult, polite as it was, could not be taken back. Some delegates avoided looking toward the human table. Others watched with open curiosity. A few younger members gave the faintest signs of approval, as if glad someone had pushed back. During the recess, Mara walked with her team through the garden paths outside the hall. The air was fresh, carrying the scent of bright flowers from the Alindran soil. Yet the beauty of the scene did little to ease the hard line of her thoughts. They said it in open session, Lita said. They think they can shape us into whatever role they choose. Aaron shook his head. They think they are offering us protection. In truth, they are protecting their control. Jaren frowned. If they truly believe we cannot stand without them, they will never give us equal ground. Not in trade, not in policy, not in anything. Dalen's voice was quiet, but steady. I have seen alliances like this in war. The side that is treated as lesser is always the one sent to the least important fronts. They give just enough to keep you alive, but never enough to let you grow strong. Mara stopped walking and looked at her team. If they cannot see us as equals, then our place here may not be worth holding. I will listen for the rest of the session, but we must prepare for every outcome, even the one they least expect. They returned to the chamber for the afternoon meeting. The debate continued, but Mara spoke little now. She answered when asked, kept her tone polite, and made no effort to hide her sharp attention. By the end of the day, the regulations were nearly ready for a vote. The chair announced that the final decision would come tomorrow. As the chamber emptied, Mara remained seated for a moment, her eyes on the black glass table. The faint patterns on its surface shifted and glowed, but her thoughts were on something else entirely. She knew the Council believed humanity would fall in line. She also knew they were wrong. The Hall of Unity felt different that morning. The crystal walls caught the light in colder colors, as if the day itself knew something important was about to happen. Delegates moved to their seats with a sense of finality. Today was the vote. Mara and her team entered together. Their faces were calm, but their steps carried a quiet strength. The human delegation took their place at the black glass table without a word. Around them, the sound of quiet conversation filled the chamber. Some voices were casual, others tense. The chair, Sorn Talvek, called the assembly to order. His tall frame stood at the head of the table, his metallic eyes scanning the room. We will now proceed to the final reading of the proposed trade regulations, he announced. His voice echoed in the chamber, smooth and confident. The Avrick's economic advisor began reading the clauses once again. Each point was familiar now. The limits on certain trade lanes, the shared technology restrictions, the definitions that would make human cargo cost more to transport. The words were delivered with practiced formality, as if saying them often enough would make them fair. When the reading ended, Sorn spoke again. This agreement represents the wisdom of the Council and the stability of our shared galaxy. Today, we decide together for the good of all. He invited final comments. A few senior delegates voiced their support. The Talran representative spoke of responsibility. The Varen delegate praised balance. Each one sounded certain that the vote would pass. Then Sorn turned toward Mara. Representative Solon, does the Terran Union wish to speak before the vote? Mara rose slowly. The chamber quieted. Every gaze turned to her. Her voice was clear and steady. The Terran Union has listened carefully to the words of this council. We have studied the terms. We have weighed the promises. We have also looked at the realities these terms would create. And we have come to a decision. She let the silence stand for a moment. These regulations do not treat humanity as an equal member. They limit our growth. They narrow our reach. They claim to offer protection. But in truth, they protect the power of those who already hold it. We will not accept them. A soft murmur moved through the chamber. Some delegates shifted in their seats. Others watched without expression. Sorn's voice was calm, but his tone carried a faint edge. Representative Solon, the regulations are not optional for members of the council. All must agree to the shared rules. Mara's gaze did not waver. Then humanity will not be part of this council. The words struck the chamber like a sudden drop in gravity. For a moment, there was only stillness. Then the voices rose, whispers, questions, disbelief. No delegation had ever said such a thing in the hall. Sorn straightened. You are choosing isolation. You will lose access to council markets, to protected trade lanes, to shared defense systems. Do you understand what that means for your people? Mara's reply was calm and certain. We understand. We also understand what it means to accept terms that keep us dependent forever. The Terran Union will build its own future, on its own terms. The Talran representative spoke, his stone-like features unchanged. This is not wise. Without our network, you will face shortages. You will struggle to compete. Mara met his gaze. Perhaps. But we will face those struggles as free partners to no one's control. We would rather risk failure than live under limits we did not choose. She gathered her documents and stepped back from the table. Her team stood with her, their movements precise and deliberate. Aaron closed his data tablet. Lita slid her notes into a case. Jaren secured the team's translation device. Dalen lifted the Terran emblem flag from its holder at the edge of the table. They turned together and walked toward the great doors of the hall. The sound of their footsteps was sharp in the silence. Some delegates stared, some whispered urgently to each other, and a few, very few, gave small nods of respect. When the human delegation reached the doors, the Elindran guard stepped aside without a word. The bright light of the capital's gardens spilled into the chamber as the doors opened. Mara did not look back. Outside, the air was cool and fresh. The twin suns were rising together over the spires, casting long shadows across the white stone paths. The scent of flowering vines drifted on the breeze. It was a peaceful contrast to the tension they had just left behind. They walked toward the docking platforms, where the Horizon Star waited in silent readiness. Crew members stood at attention as the delegation approached. The ship's captain, a broad-shouldered woman with weathered features, saluted sharply. "Orders, Representative?" Mara's answer was simple. "We return to Earth, and we prepare." As the Horizon Star rose from the platform, Mara stood at the forward viewport. Below, the capital city spread out like a map of light and shadow. The Hall of Unity shone in the morning sun, its crystal walls as beautiful as they were unyielding. Aaron joined her at the viewport. "They will not forget this," he said quietly. "They are not meant to," Mara replied. "They will expect us to come back. They will expect us to ask for a seat again." "And if they do?" Lita asked from behind them. Mara kept her eyes on the distant curve of Alindra's horizon. "Then they will learn what it means when humanity decides it does not need their table." The horizon star cleared the city's airspace and broke free into the dark of space. The great silver ring of stations around Alindra passed below them. Soon the ship was aligned for the jump to faster-than-light travel. In the quiet before the engines engaged, Mara looked at her team. Each one met her, gaze without hesitation. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. Not as voices in someone else's hall, but as builders of their own. The jump drive engaged, and the stars stretched into lines of light. The capital world of the Galactic Council fell away, behind them growing smaller until it vanished into the distance. The path ahead was uncertain, but it was theirs. The Hall of Unity did not return to normal after the humans left. The vote on the trade regulation still passed, but the chamber felt emptier, as if a thread had been pulled from the weave. Delegates avoided speaking about the walkout in public, yet it was the only subject in private corridors and side meetings. Some claimed the Terran Union would soon regret its decision. Others believed the humans were bluffing and would return quietly once they realized the cost of leaving. A few wondered if humanity's departure would encourage other younger members to demand more from the Council. In the days that followed, official messages from Earth confirmed that the Terran Union had withdrawn from all Council trade agreements. Human ships stopped requesting access to shared routes. Trade reports noted an immediate drop in certain goods that had been moving through human-controlled lanes. At first, the change seemed small. The Council's senior members continued their normal work. Freight lines still moved. Markets remained open. But under the surface, small disruptions began to spread. 1 week after the walkout, the Council's supply office reported a shortage of microfusion cores in 3 sectors. These were a human design, smaller and more efficient than anything else available. They were used in mining drones, deep space shuttles, and emergency power systems. Without them, production slowed. 2 weeks later, navigation reports showed that certain mining convoys were taking longer routes to avoid passing through human space. Fuel costs rose. Delivery times stretched. The delays were small at first, but they built with every passing day. In the communications wing of the Council's capital station, messages began to arrive from independent worlds. These were not Council members, but they had often traded with human merchants. Now they reported that the Terran Union was offering new agreements directly, bypassing the Council entirely. Sorn Talvek read these reports in silence. As chair, he had to maintain the appearance of control, but even he could see that the humans were not struggling as predicted. They were moving quickly to build their own network, and some worlds were eager to join it. Meanwhile, on Earth, the horizon. Star's return was met with quiet celebration. The decision to leave the Council had been bold, but many citizens saw it as necessary. In the great assembly hall of the Terran Union, Mara Solon gave a short address. She spoke of independence, of building alliances based on fairness, and of shaping a future without limits set by others. Her words traveled far beyond Earth. Human colonies on distant worlds sent messages of support. Merchant captains pledged their ships to the new trade network. Engineers began planning for expanded shipyards in several star systems. In the outer colonies, crews worked day and night to upgrade stations that had once been simple waypoints into full trading hubs. Cargo containers bearing the blue Terran emblem began to appear on routes far from any council control. Some independent merchants reported that the humans offered better terms than the council ever had. Back in the Hall of Unity, the first hints of unease began to show in open session. A representative from the Kalari sector asked if the council planned to replace the lost human trade lanes. An Elindran trade official assured them it was being handled, but could give no clear timetable. By the third week, the council's economic advisors were warning of deeper shortages. The loss of human microfusion cores was beginning to affect shipbuilding in multiple sectors. Replacement designs existed, but they were larger, heavier, and required more fuel. The older models slowed new ship production, which in turn slowed the transport of goods. The Varan delegate, who had once spoken about fairness, now pressed for action. "We cannot ignore the effect of losing the Terran network," he said in open session. "They moved goods faster and at lower cost than most council fleets. That efficiency is now gone." Sorn Talvek listened without expression. "The council has survived greater challenges," he replied. "We will adapt." But in private, even Sorn was uneasy. Reports from border sectors showed that human exploratory fleets were mapping new routes at a speed no one expected. Some of these routes cut directly across areas the council had long considered under its quiet influence. The humans were not retreating. They were expanding. On Elindra's surface, in the bustling trade districts outside the hall, merchants spoke openly about the change. Some missed the human goods. Others complained about rising prices. A few were already planning to move operations closer to human space, where new markets were opening. In the quiet meeting rooms of the Talrin delegation, concerns were voiced in low, careful tones. "We assumed they would need our network," one advisor said, "but they are building their own, and it is growing faster than expected." The Talrin representative, who had once spoken about guiding the younger species, frowned deeply. "They are moving without hesitation. If they succeed, they will no longer be the younger species. They will be a rival." By the end of the first month, the Council's news channels began reporting on the Terran question. Analysts debated whether the humans would eventually return, or whether the Council would have to compete with them directly. Public opinion was divided. Some citizens admired humanity's boldness. Others feared it would weaken the unity of the galaxy. For Mara and her team, the work was only beginning. In a secure chamber on Earth's orbital station, they reviewed maps filled with glowing routes. Lines marked new agreements with independent worlds. Circles showed planned construction sites for shipyards and trading hubs. Aaron pointed to a cluster of lines near the outer rim. "This region is full of potential. If we link it with the colonies in the far belt, we can create a corridor that bypasses half the Council's routes." Leda smiled faintly. "And once it is running, even their fastest ships will be 2 days slower than ours." Dalen, ever the strategist, looked at the map in silence for a long moment. "The Council is watching us. They will not ignore this, forever. But for now, they are hesitating. That hesitation is our advantage." Mara nodded. "They thought we could not stand without them. Now they are beginning to realize they need us more than we ever needed them." Far away, In the grand crystal chamber of the Hall of Unity, Sorn Talvek sat alone at the head of the central table. The patterns of light on the black glass surface shifted and moved, but he barely saw them. For the first time since the walkout, he allowed himself to admit what he had been resisting. The Council had made a mistake. Weeks passed since the Terran Union's departure from the Galactic Council. At first, many delegates believed the humans would falter. They expected delays, shortages, or protests from colonies now cut off from Council support. They were wrong. In E. The upper levels of the Council's command center, alarms sounded softly. A Council operations officer called for Sorn Talvek. Chair Talvek, multiple sectors report critical shortages of microfusion cores and essential navigation equipment. Production lines are slowing. Cargo fleets are delayed across the inner and middle zones. Sorn's face remained calm, but inside, unease grew. He moved to the main observation window, overlooking the bustling capital spaceport. Ships of many colors and designs waited for clearance. Council ships, efficient and numerous, were now moving slower than planned. He turned to the officer. "Have we quantified the full impact?" "Yes, Chair. Without human-supplied components, we estimate at least 20% longer delivery times across multiple sectors. Independent traders are redirecting to Terran-controlled routes. We have no effective control over these movements." Sorn nodded slowly. "Prepare an emergency session of the Council. Every senior delegate must attend. They need to understand the scale of what we are facing." The Council convened in the Hall of Unity for an extraordinary meeting. The chamber, usually alive with smooth discussions, felt tense and uncertain. Delegates whispered as they took their seats. Some avoided looking at each other, aware that the Terran walkout had left them exposed. The Varan representative, normally calm, spoke first. "Chair Talvek, we must acknowledge the impact of humanity's absence. Our fleets are slowed. Trade corridors are disrupted. Many colonies are reporting delays and shortages. This was not expected, but it is real." The Talran delegate leaned forward. "We assumed the humans would struggle outside the Council. Instead, they are building their own networks faster than any of us predicted. They are now trading directly with worlds we rely on." Murmurs spread across the chamber. The weight of reality sank into every delegate present. The Council had assumed control, stability, and long-term planning would bind all members. Humanity had shattered that assumption with a single walkout. Sorn raised his hand for silence. "We underestimated them. Their technology, efficiency, and willingness to act independently were stronger than we predicted. I now see that the Council's assumptions were flawed." A Kalari delegate spoke cautiously. "Chair, if we continue as we are, our influence will weaken. Humanity's presence, once considered a minor component, has become central to stability. We cannot replace them easily." The murmurs turned into full discussion. Delegates spoke over one another, each pointing out losses in trade, delays in military logistics, and even issues in scientific research. Human engineers had contributed to projects across several sectors. Without them, some initiatives were halted. Outside the Council chambers in the capital corridors, independent traders whispered about the Terran networks. Cargo from Earth and the colonies was moving smoothly, faster and more reliably than Council shipments. News reports highlighted successful human trade missions, and many younger members of the Council quietly expressed admiration for the Terrans. On Earth, Mara and her team continued their rapid expansion. They opened new trade stations and completed upgrades on key shipyards. Every shipment was carefully planned to avoid conflict but maximize efficiency. Colonies welcomed Terran fleets. Independent traders preferred human contracts to council. Delays. Arun reviewed shipping data with Lyta in a secure operations room. The Council still has the largest number of ships, he said, but they cannot move as efficiently without our cores and guidance systems. Their fleets are slower and less reliable now. Lyta nodded. Every colony we reach strengthens our position. Some are even sending proposals for longer-term trade partnerships. The Council may regret thinking they could ignore us. Back in the Council chambers, tensions rose. Representatives argued about who should propose emergency measures. The Elendran delegates suggested imposing penalties on human trade. The Varen argued that sanctions would only push more worlds toward the Terrans. The debate revealed growing panic beneath the formal appearances of control. Sorn observed the discussion quietly. He had always believed in measured decisions, in slow adaptation, and in council consensus. Now, every delay in action felt like another victory for the humans. The absence of rash measures from the Terrans made the council look weaker. Enough, Sorn finally said, his voice firm. We cannot hope to outmaneuver the Terran Union using threats or delays. They have proven capable of independent action. We must rethink our approach. The chamber fell silent. The weight of the statement settled on every delegate. For the first time, many considered the possibility that humanity would not return willingly. If the Council continued as it had, the humans could dominate trade and influence without ever needing approval. In secret corners of the capital, advisors began drawing maps of human-controlled trade routes. Analysts calculated the time required for Council fleets to reclaim control if negotiations failed. Every estimate revealed a sobering truth. The humans were already too fast, too efficient, and too well prepared. In the orbital operations center overlooking Earth, Mara received intercepted communications from Council sectors. The Council was discussing strategies. Some officials proposed force, others debated rapid technological replacement. The humans read the messages with careful interest. They are realizing, Mara said calmly, that leaving the table has consequences they cannot reverse, but it is too late for them to act first. Dalen smiled faintly. And every moment they hesitate is another day we expand our network. Soon, Council shipments will be slower than ours in nearly every sector. The human strategy was clear and simple. Build, trade, expand, and never act recklessly. Every colony they reached strengthened their independence. Every contract signed with independent merchants added to their influence. The Terran Union had become an unexpected force of efficiency and reliability, a mirror that reflected the Council's weaknesses. Back in the Hall of Unity, discussions had shifted from assumptions to fear. The Council realized that the humans were no longer just a member to be guided. They were a rival, a force whose absence was more damaging than anyone had predicted. Sorn Talvek looked down at the black glass table. For the first time, the emptiness of the human seats seemed heavy. The silence that once signified absence now carried weight. The Council's advisors had painted the numbers clearly. The Terrans' withdrawal was not a temporary inconvenience. It was a shift in balance. I underestimated them, Sorn whispered quietly. And every day we wait, they grow stronger without us. The delegates began drafting proposals for emergency measures, for new alliances, and for strategies to mitigate the loss. Yet deep down, every senior member knew the truth. Humanity's choice to leave had changed the rules of the galaxy. The Council no longer held the certainty it once claimed. Far away, Mara watched the stars from the Horizon Star's command deck. She could feel the ripple of change spreading through the galaxy. The Council's hesitation, their slow realization of consequences, would give the Terrans every advantage. "And they will understand soon enough," she said softly to Aaron. "The galaxy is no longer theirs to control." Aaron nodded. "They will regret assuming we could not survive alone. Soon, they will see that walking away from their table was the greatest mistake they ever made." The stars stretched ahead of them, bright and endless. The Terran Union was moving forward. The Council was learning the hard truth. Humanity's absence was no weakness. It was the first step toward a power they had never imagined they could hold. Months had passed since the Terran Union left the Galactic Council. What had begun as a confident gamble had grown into a decisive advantage. Humanity was no longer the dependent member that many had underestimated. They had built a network of trade, influence, and innovation that spread across countless systems. Inside the Hall of Unity, tension was thick. Delegates whispered urgently as they took their seats. Every representative felt the pressure. The Council had survived wars, crises, and disputes before, but this was different. This challenge came not from conflict, but from absence. The humans had walked away, and their absence was now a force that could not be ignored. Sorn Talvek rose to speak. His tone was measured but firm. "We convene today not as a body of control, but as one facing reality. The Terran Union has demonstrated capabilities that surpass our initial estimates. Our systems are delayed. Independent worlds are aligning with them. We can no longer assume our influence is absolute." Murmurs ran through the chamber. Some delegates shifted uncomfortably. Others nodded, knowing the truth in Sorn's words. The Alindran delegate, usually confident and proud, spoke next. "Chair Talvek, we underestimated their speed, their efficiency, and their strategy. Our fleets are slower. Our trade routes less reliable. If we do not act, the Terrans will shape the galaxy without us." The Varan delegate added, "We must acknowledge that our previous plans failed. Punishments and sanctions cannot change. The network they have built, they are already beyond our immediate reach." Outside the council chambers, in the capital corridors, messages from border sectors revealed growing reliance on Terran trade. Ships carrying Terran goods and microfusion cores moved quickly and efficiently. Merchants praised the Terrans for reliability, fairness, and speed. The Council's once unquestioned authority was now quietly challenged. On Earth, Mara and her team monitored the Council's responses with interest. They had expected hesitation, but the scale of the Council's scramble exceeded predictions. Independent systems were flocking to Terran agreements. Production schedules had expanded. Supply lines were optimized to deliver critical goods faster than ever before. Aaron pointed at a holographic map of the galaxy. "They are preparing to negotiate, but we hold all the cards. Every system we trade with now strengthens our position. They cannot compel us without our consent." Lyda added, "We have demonstrated that leaving was not a weakness. It was a strategy. Every delay, every shortage in Council-controlled space reminds them of our value." Back in the Hall of Unity, the discussion turned to proposals for urgent action. Some delegates argued for reaching out to the Terrans diplomatically. Others suggested technological acceleration to replace lost resources. Sorn listened quietly. He knew that any direct approach required caution. A rushed attempt to regain control could backfire. The Talran delegate finally spoke. "Chair Talvek, perhaps it is time to send an emissary. We cannot assume they will return willingly, but we must explore negotiation. If handled correctly, we may regain some influence." Sorn nodded slowly. "Prepare a delegation. But let it be clear. We approach not from strength, but from recognition of our position. We are no longer the dominant force. They have shown that walking away was not a mistake." Meanwhile, Terran envoys were receiving messages from council sectors. The tone was careful, almost hesitant. They invited the Terrans to discuss mutual interests. The humans reviewed the messages calmly. Every decision reflected their confidence and patience. Mara addressed the team. "They want a meeting. That is natural. But we set the terms. They must recognize that we are independent, capable, and in control of our own destiny." Dalen smiled faintly. "It is a rare moment. The Council must acknowledge our strength before we consider any compromise. The galaxy has shifted. They know it, and so must we." The meeting between Terran and Council representatives took place on neutral space. The chamber was vast, filled with light and holographic displays. Sorn Talvek and his team faced Mara and her advisors. The atmosphere was formal but tense. Sorn began. "The Council acknowledges the Terran Union's independence and capability. We recognize that your withdrawal has revealed our reliance on your contributions. We wish to discuss ways to coexist and cooperate for mutual benefit." Mara listened carefully. She spoke with calm authority. "The Terran Union has always sought fairness, transparency, and progress. We left the Council because we could no longer accept limitations imposed without respect for our capabilities. Any discussion of cooperation must reflect equality. We will not return as a subordinate member." The Council delegation nodded. Sorn understood the significance. This was not defiance. It was clarity. Humanity would not be persuaded by authority or threats. They would engage on their own terms. Negotiations continued for hours. The Terrans offered agreements based on mutual benefit, shared exploration, and joint trade ventures, but only under terms that guaranteed Terran independence. The Council, recognizing the growing influence of the humans, had little choice but to accept. Outside the meeting chamber, news spread quickly. Across multiple systems, the Terran Union was now openly recognized as a force that had reshaped the balance of power. Independent worlds celebrated the success of trade and cooperation on Terran terms. The humans' reputation for efficiency, fairness, and innovation grew stronger than any prior council promotion. Sorn Talvek, reflecting on the events, understood the lesson fully. The council had assumed control would always be a binding force. They had overlooked the value of independence, ingenuity, and action. Humanity had shown that leaving was not weakness. It was the ultimate demonstration of strength. Back on Earth, Mara addressed the crew of the Horizon Star. "We have achieved what many thought impossible. We walked away, built our own path, and proved our strength. The galaxy will never see us as dependent again. This is just the beginning. We will continue to expand, explore, and grow, and we will do so on our terms." Arun smiled as he reviewed the new trade routes. "Every system we reach now strengthens us. The Council will respect us, not because they must, but because they understand that we hold the advantage. Lyda looked out at the stars. We did not seek conflict. We sought independence. And now the galaxy knows that humanity's strength is not in numbers or titles, but in determination, skill, and vision. Dalen nodded. The humans have shown what others only imagined. We are builders, explorers, and innovators. Walking away was a test of the galaxy's assumptions, and we passed with excellence. Across the Council, reports confirmed the reality of the shift. Every sector noted the efficiency of Terran trade and the growing allegiance of independent systems. The Hall of Unity, once a symbol of unquestioned control, now reflected a council that had learned humility. Sorn Talvek addressed his delegates one final time. We must adapt. We must respect the Terran Union as an equal. Their departure has changed the rules. It has reminded us that influence is earned, not assumed. Let this be a lesson for all. The galaxy belongs to those who act with vision and courage. The humans returned to their ships, their fleets now stronger and faster than ever. The stars stretched endlessly before them, full of opportunities and possibilities. Humanity had proven itself capable, independent, and unstoppable. The Council's regret was complete, but it came too late to reverse what had been accomplished. Mara looked toward the horizon of distant suns. We did not just survive, we thrived. And now the galaxy knows that when humanity walks away from the table, it does so with purpose, strength, and the ability to shape the future. And so, the Terran Union sailed onward, not as a member seeking approval, but as a force of innovation, independence, and hope. The galaxy had learned the cost of underestimating humanity.